Hi, my name is Spencer MacKay. I'm a filmmaker, so I've been working in Halifax, Nova Scotia now for the past 4 years, I think. I graduated in screener in 2018, and I've been working as a writer, director, producer, also a stand-up comedian every now and again, in locally here within the city.
Okay, first question. How much are you paying him?
Excuse me? I'm not paying my husband?
Right, you're not paying him. Next thing you're gonna tell me that it's legal for those people. Stacy, what is it when someone from Norway marries someone from Sweden?
Interracial?
I don't think that's racial.
The film is about an absolutely deplorable podcast host. We really try to make him the most deplorable version of what that could be. The film is about him coming under fire for some comments made about the disability community and whether or not disability, members of the community could were capable of forming and having long-lasting, happy and fulfilling relationships. And you don't see the comments that he made on purpose, but you see the aftermath of that. And in an effort to do some damage control, he invites an interable couple onto his podcast to begin talking with them about their relationship. And very quickly, you find out that he has no interest in learning about them, but just all about himself. And it's really, there's a lot of layers to it. It was really fun to do. We did it with a wonderful comedian in Halifax named Robbie Vino, who's traveled all around the country with his stand-up work, and he just knocked it out of the park. And what was really lovely is there's a disability coalition in Nova Scotia, and one of its most prominent members, Vicky Levesque, was also willing to be a part of our film. It's a film that I'm very proud of. I think it has a lot to say about who we give platforms to in today's society, the stigmas of what interracial relationships face, because there is a lot of stigmatization. I wrote that film because of how annoyed I was about the stigmatization and the struggles that I was facing. Everything you see in that film has some root to my personal life in some way, shape, or form, even down to the main character.
It was as if everything was in slow motion. Then, in one foul swoop, I caught the bottom of the bottle off as if it wasn't even there.
Wow, that's amazing, Scarjo. How did you do that?
I don't know. These things happen, Kind of like I'm in a movie or something.
Scout is primarily a comedy film. And then this scout leader, played by the wonderful comedian in Halifax, Chris Halif, is he often wows his scout troop with these big tales of like adventure and whimsy and just absolute nonsense. None of it is really all that impressive, but these kids love him for it. They idolize him. And without giving too much of the film away, over the course of the film, you kind of strip some layers back on who Scourge is, and you kind of find out who he is versus who the persona is.
We have some questions for you, Spencer, related to COVID and in relation to your practice. And the first one is, how did you have to adapt your art practice throughout the past 2 years?
My first production outside of school was a film I made called Subject 44. And, a great script, was nice, and it was for this wonderful Easter Seals Disability Film Challenge, which is a 56-hour film challenge. And, great organization, great all of that. But for a first film to make outside of school, it is not a good idea because that's not the time you want to test what you can do. You're already testing what you can do when you have no safety guards whatsoever. And so to add on top of that a 56-hour time crunch is just way too much. And that production was, awful. It came out well, don't get me wrong, but we lost the location the night before. We had to do some guerrilla filmmaking. We had to, part of the sound equipment that we got was not usable, which meant that all of the sound equipment that we got was not usable. And so we really tried to rush into things with that one. And with the pandemic, when you take the time to consider the health risks and all that, you also take the time to consider everything. And compared to the 56 hours of production I did on subject number 44, with the months and months of preparation I did on my film Scudder Joe, I started writing Scudder Joe in December of 2020. I started the pre-production stage in I believe February, and then we didn't film that until the Canada Day weekend of 2021, and so there was a whole roughly 6 month time span in there where we could really fine tune the details and make sure that if we were going to do this, we did it right. The other film that I made during the pandemic was a film called Interabled Flaking Around with Matt Flake, which is a podcast film. It's much more smaller scale than the spectacle or the scope of Scudder Joe. And I started writing that film. The original idea for that came in October 2019, but the actual first draft of the script came in January of 2021. And just like with Scudder Joe, we started the pre-production on that in September of 2021, and we didn't film that until January of 2022. And so, in that way too, we took the time to get it right.
I'm wondering what kind of new wisdom do you feel that you have that affects or influences your current art practice?
The thing with Scudder Joe, I had been wanting to make that film ever since I was a kid. The character of Scudder Joe actually comes from a wonderful EPA that I had in a school named Sean Hopkins, who I think was another very strong influence in my comedy as well, because the guy's just wonderful. We're still friends even to this day. One of the things that he would do was, I don't know how much people know about an EPA, but an EPA here is like an educational program assistant. So they help people with disabilities in the classroom. And, he didn't always have stuff to do when the teacher was giving a lecture. So when the teacher was, sometimes they would take my laptop and he would type an absolutely absurd, ridiculous story on the laptop, which actually is the opening scene of the film. The opening scene of Scudder Joe is one of those stories that he typed up on my laptop. But I remember even then I was like, oh, I want to turn this into a movie so badly, but but the movie it would have been when I was a kid would have just been the story. And that's not a good film. The movie it is now is also, there's a story on top of it. So it's a story within a larger story as well. And having the time to think about that over a period of many years and not just going with the first idea that came to mind really helped make it better in every way. Because if it was just the first 3 minutes of the film, it would have been a terrible movie. But because it's 3 minutes of a 12-minute film, there's a lot more story in there, and there's a lot more heart in there behind it. And I was able to use that inspiration I had as a kid, combined with what I was really going through in my life, which is a reevaluation of my life. When I wrote Scudder Joe, it was right after this very difficult time with this woman that I had been friends with for 4.5 years, and long story short, some things happened, and we don't talk anymore. I'll leave it there. I want to be respectful to that person, but it was very emotionally difficult on me. And it forced me to reevaluate a lot of things in my life, the way that I was living, the way that I was operating as an artist. And it I will say, as much pain as that brought me, it did bring me everything that I've done since. Because, for the 12 hours that I had hope in that situation, I made a lot of choices that have really paid off since then. And that informed both Scouter Joe and Enabled. But also on top of that, when I was, making Scouter Joe, I was losing my grandfather. It was right after I lost my grandfather. He was such a pivotal part of my life. To lose him, to lose someone that I idolized and loved with all my heart, was a really difficult thing. And being able to get up every morning and work on Scouter Joe and do something that I know he would have loved just as much as I did really helped me process my grief in a lot of ways, I think. And it brought me closer to him while also giving me a reason to get up every morning and continue on with life. Because he's not the type of person who would have wanted people to sit around and mourn and grieve over him. He wanted people to live their lives and to do all they could with them. And this was the perfect way to honor that for me.
It sounded to me in what you said like the time allowed you a reflection period so that then going into these projects that are so important to you, you had time to like incorporate those thoughts and your processing of those really like pivotal life experiences into your films. And that's also a reflection of you taking your time.
Yeah, and I grew up with a friend of mine, a wonderful friend, despite what you're about to hear, who as a kid was wanting to protect me. He was very concerned for me. He did this out of love, but he did say that like people would see me and treat me differently because of the disability, and that really affected me. It was awful for my development because suddenly, he made it seem as though what I did didn't matter. It wouldn't matter if something good happened, it was because of the disability. And something bad happened, it was also because of the disability. And, that's a really lonely way to live. And for me, in the years that have since followed, slowly I'm learning more and more that there's a lot more nuance to that. Because, yes, there are going to be people who do treat me differently because of the disability. And that's simply unavoidable. But there's going to be a lot of people, maybe even more people, arguably. I think a lot of people would argue more people who are not going to. And, in the last several years, I've really begun to see that no, what I do does matter. What the decisions I make do matter because making the choice, I go back to the thing with that girl, and for the 12 hours that I thought maybe something might happen between us, I reevaluated my life. And at that point in my life, I was still living in the same university residence that I lived in for 6 years, which was nice, but not for a 24-year-old. I was still living, paycheck to paycheck. I didn't go after any grants at that point because, I think what's the point? I'm better off just kind of scraping together what I can and doing these film challenges. And I wasn't living my life necessarily to the fullest. And now I have this new apartment. I'm out there. I'm working hard for these grants and making the projects that I'm really passionate about instead of these 56-hour film challenges, which, yeah, they're nice, but you don't spend, years dreaming about these projects. Whereas now I'm doing the things I want to do in my life because I feel that autonomy again. And it's an ongoing process. I'm still working on that. I'm still learning, but more and more that's coming back. And I would say to anyone watching, particularly if you have a disability, what you do matters, and the choices that you make can help you, and you can get a better situation for yourself if you take the time to learn from people and work hard and you know really look into things. And it's not easy. It takes a lot of time, but I think you can do it one step at a time.
Yes, Spencer, thank you so much for your time. It's been like so inspiring to hear you talk about your practice and also about what you've been learning and how you've been adapting during the past 2 years during the pandemic in such complicated circumstances. So I'm so grateful to have had the opportunity to talk with you today and to hear about your films, and I'm so excited to watch the ones that are coming out.
I can't wait to hear what you think of them.